Hello and welcome to today's showcase. Today we are looking at Chidori, which is a 7-second long cooldown ninjutsu, has a power of 2 and a range of 2, and has high armor when you're using it. And yeah, it's the exact same as Lightning Blade. I literally have nothing else to say. Anyway, uh, it has a little bit of a different startup animation. I mean, I guess that's cool, right? I think it has less range actually than Lightning Blade. I'm not sure actually. Um, Chidori, Lightning Blade, any Chidori to be honest with you, can be used as like a, it kind of has like a distance kind of thing where like you just travel because of using the ninjutsu. Yeah, I really don't. I don't have anything. I just genuinely don't. It's that basic. So I'm just gonna leave you with the gameplay, some music, I guess. I wanted to actually talk about something, and the same company, Solely or whatever this game's company is, essentially the developers, Solely, I think I'm saying it right. They're apparently creating a new game, that is basically Shinobi Striker 2, but better, because it's actually meant to be ninja related. Like, it's called Project Edo, apparently, so it looks interesting, and, the ambitions and the things that they said are quite high, actually, for what the game is meant to be. So essentially, it's just meant to be like the ultimate ninja game. It's going to be kind of like Shinobi Striker, I suppose, but obviously not Shinobi Striker. But it should be interesting because it is genuinely, how can I say? Because they're the same people that made Ninja Gaiden, right? Not only Ninja Gaiden, but like a few other titles that are quite popular. And so I'm thinking, okay, that's interesting. But what they said specifically for Project Edo is that they want to revive the name of Made in Japan because it's lost its value, essentially. That's what their whole thing is, right? So, like, they're like, oh, we've been making, uh, we made Ninja Gaiden and a few other things, but, I think it's time we step up and shit. And, it does talk about how, they did Shinobi Striker successfully, so they know how to make something multiplayer. But obviously, quite a terrible example, in my opinion. But I think the thing is, Japanese people and Japanese society hold a very different perspective on things, right? Like, for example, this technically is a difficult game the more and more you think about it. There are so many interactions happening at once, and the fact that, you know, uh, each and every single ninjutsu that you use always has a counter, always has something to it. Some things don't, because, well, the game developers can't keep up, and not only that, but, uh, you know, there's only a limited amount of ninjutsus that actually break something. So it's not exactly a fair system. If I have Almighty Push and I could spam it endlessly, I'm not gonna get hit. But if I could also have Konway Lightning Blade, then I'm also not gonna get hit. So, it's like a clash between two different things, right? One uses Chidori, one uses Rasengan. Rasengan lasts longer, and that's the reason why Rasengan can still push you back. In comparison to Chidori, Chidori just does damage and kind of can stun the person if they're standing still, right? And I'm just saying this as an example, like a visual example in your head. And like, there is such a massive, how can I say, contrast between the two, right? Where you have something that essentially is forced to be fixed. Forced because it has an IP. And because of an IP, it's the main reason why it's been carrying this company, in my opinion, right? Like Ninja Gaiden, Shinobi Striker with Naruto and stuff like that, right? I feel like, if they're gonna create a game, they really should think of other ways that they could go ahead and make it successful, right? Like, take Shinobi Striker as the biggest example. And I think what they're trying to do, what they're trying to say, is that Shinobi Striker learned how to crawl and walk so that then possibly Project Edo is the next thing that they work on so that then Project Edo can actually run. So that's my opinion and thoughts on it, right? Before it's even shown or released, or even if there's not even gameplay of it, I'm pretty sure. So, we have no clue what it's going to be like. But if it were up to me, and I'm saying this technically as a game designer, but I suppose as an indie game designer. But if you're going to design a game, take inspiration from a few other games and then think strategically, right? What would yield you the most amount of money without having to go ahead and disappoint a community? Because the more you appreciate the community, the more you respect it, the more people it's going to bring in. Not only that, but you want to make sure that it's correct, right? The way that you do it. For example, I want to, let's say, develop something very stereotypical, right? But it doesn't exist, right? So this is the main thing about my game studio. I'm going to try and make games that don't exist, but have always been in our, like, collective minds, right? So, for example, let's say a medieval RPG. Do we have a single game that has a knight, wizard, healer, archer, rogue, all the classic D&D stuff, right? Technically, we have D&D, yeah, but do we have anything where it's like a similar thing to Absolver or a similar thing to Shinobi Striker? Is it something where it's 3D? And is it something that we ourselves can choose to customize? Is it something that we can go ahead and play and feel like, oh wow, this is always going to be different because it's procedurally generated? For example, maybe procedurally generated dungeons and stuff, right? That would be sick because you have different dungeons each and every single time you go in. Not only that, but the whole thing with RPGs is that you casually level up, you casually do this, you do that, similar to RuneScape, right? But obviously, RuneScape is copyrighted. But regardless of that, you can still make an absolutely amazing system. And I think that's kind of one of the issues that a lot of game developers don't try to do. They don't try to create a new system. They keep trying to do the same old system and expect it to somehow keep working. For example, Dark Souls didn't copy too many things. It took inspiration from things, yes, but it didn't exactly go ahead and say, oh, hey, I'm just going to copy this and I'm going to keep copying it, right? It kept changing itself over the years in order to go ahead and make a different experience, but yet have the same kind of system. Not the same exact system, but more or less like, how much more can I remix the same system so that then it feels different and is different? For example, Elden Ring is not the same as Dark Souls. Dark Souls has a completely different feeling, completely different vibe, and honestly has its own entire system, right? And in comparison to Elden Ring, Elden Ring is like nowhere close to Dark Souls, and Dark Souls just feels, completely different in comparison to it. And that's the thing, right? Shinobi Striker right now, the way that everyone plays, the way that things are, everything about it, right, is quite bad. But in my opinion, there's a reason for that, right? As a game designer, there are a few things that you want to test, even if it may seem evil on a community, right? You want to test, for example, for the sake of money, let's say monetization, right? You want to see how much a community can tolerate when your system is so good, right? If your system is good, right, people will still go ahead and buy and do stuff even if you have a terrible monetization system. And that's because your game is genuinely unique. So, yes, you can be quite evil, right? And still gain money from it. But it will not be the same or the equivalent of something where you genuinely develop it with a passion. For example, if I go ahead and have the world's best, I don't know, medieval fantasy isekai anime medieval RPG, then yeah, sure. It's gonna have the classic stuff, etc., and kind of be something that probably a lot of people are gonna play just because they have nothing better to do, and it's gonna feel almost like Destiny 2, but if it was medieval. We don't even have something like that, and that's crazy to me. Think about it. Imagine how good Destiny 2 is, right? Yeah, sure, it's quite ambitious, it's quite big, but it started out kind of small, right? And it still grew itself from that small part to eventually become a huge thing. And I think that's the important part. Games are stopping evolution of their own systems. A lot of game developers end up kind of just throwing it away in exchange for, I don't know, time, money, and all of this stuff, right? There isn't any true heart to it as it used to be, I'd say, right? Like, for example, right now, I'm not being paid to be a game designer, right? The payment truly is going to come from either the success of the game or from me using my mind and trying to help other game developers, maybe. I don't even know. I don't even think that'll happen either, because game designers are quite fucking arrogant people usually. They kind of end up just doing whatever they think is best instead of genuinely trying to, ask themselves, is this truly okay for me to just leave it and let it be? Because as a game designer, you kind of have to be half a perfectionist and half not, right? You gotta make sure that whatever you make is genuinely playable. Otherwise, you'll have a game that you can't finish and you can't play. And, there's a difference between skill and there's a difference between unplayable. For example, Shinobi Striker is slowly developing into being unplayable, right? And I'm sure that eventually they are going to patch a few things, decrease the attack power of stuff, but the whole thing is, if you're gonna develop a game, you're gonna need to make sure that the moment you monetize it, it's something to do with DLCs, maps, things like that, rather than things that would impact the gameplay so heavily to the point where we have, Shinobi Striker number 2. We don't want Shinobi Striker number 2, okay? I'm gonna be real honest with you. I'd rather have a game that is far more like a genuine ninja, while combined with Shinobi Striker's combat loop and also having Absolver's kind of technicality without its difficulty, right? I love the difficulty of Shinobi Striker, I'm not gonna lie. Everyone is half either extremely good or they're either extremely bad, which is just purely because of matchmaking, right? And maybe not enough people. I don't know. At the same time, because of weapons, because of ninjutsus, blah blah blah, stuff like that, obviously the game's going to be way more difficult than it should be. And I think what they need to realize is for Project Edo to succeed, you need to make sure that these ninjas, right, are genuinely just human beings. The weapons don't change the damage, but rather the outcome. Every single technique that you do should technically be something that's just a step towards your creativity and a step towards an action, rather than it being the main thing that kills. So yeah, anyway, I don't have much time to talk because that's the whole gameplay, and I can't be able to add more clips. So yeah, I'll see you next video. Thanks for listening, I guess. Peace out.